Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? Lately, I've been fixing up cassette Walkmans, but this time, let's take on one a bit less analog in nature. This Sony MZ-R37 MiniDisc recorder was generously sent my way by a viewer named Asaf. He explained that it needed a bit of restoration, and it certainly looks like it. There's lots of wear and grime, along with sticker residue and a few large dents. The plastic has yellowed in the spots where its silver paint has worn through, and dust has managed to get under the clear display cover. Overall, this recorder is in rough shape and would be difficult to get looking great on its own. Thankfully, a second identical unit was included in the package, and it seems to be in much better condition. It's not perfect, there's signs of wear on it too, and the top cover is dented and a bit bent. The big problem though is that it, unfortunately, doesn't work. It tries to spin up a disc but can't read it and ends up just making cool spaceship sounds instead. This is a sure sign of laser failure, which is difficult to fix since replacement parts aren't available anymore. Which is probably just as well because this recorder also suffered from a serious battery leak at some point in the past. The electrolyte even made it to the spring terminals inside the unit. That first recorder, despite its rough appearance, managed to escape this fate, and perhaps even more surprisingly, it still operates just fine. So it became clear what needed to happen next. Swapping the front panels was the most obvious task. Not just because of wear, but also that the UV exposure had even managed to turn the record switch a darker shade of red. Switching the top covers made sense, especially after I discovered a problem with the inner disc holder. Normally it's supported by the cover, but on the first recorder, it's moving freely. On the left side, it's supported by part of the hinge mechanism, but the right side of the cover has a hook that it latches into. And somehow, on this one, it's been broken off. To address both of these, I first had to remove the bottom cover, which I planned on swapping between the two units anyway. While this recorder definitely saw some use, at least care was taken with its batteries. There's no sign that any had ever leaked in it. The front panel doesn't contain any electronics. It's just a plastic fascia that holds the button and switch covers and simply unclips from the bottom to expose the PCB underneath. It's not really possible to swap just the buttons because they're heat-staked into place, though it looks like a couple managed to break free anyway. The LCD had a serious coating of dust and the top of its frame had developed a little bit of corrosion. I removed the two screws securing the top lid, but it didn't want to come off. Something was still holding it on the right side. A quick look in the service manual explained what was going on. There's a retaining clip for that hinge, and it's located on the underside of the recorder. With it removed, I could lift the top panel away. I repeated the disassembly on the donor minidisc recorder. When I flipped the bottom panel over, it became clear how bad the battery leakage had been. Electrolyte covered the entire battery compartment. They must have been left for quite a while. Next, I got the front panel unclipped, then I proceeded to remove the disc compartment lid, remembering to pull out the retaining clip first this time. The top and bottom panels on this model are made from aluminum, which makes them susceptible to dents or becoming bent. I carefully tried to straighten the back side of the lid by hand and feel like I got a pretty decent result. It's not perfect, but definitely better than before. The front of the lid also needed a little tweak to make it flat again, so it would sit flush with the rest of the recorder when closed. Last for the lid was a dent I wanted to try to fix. You can see the stress marks on the inside. I used the plastic handle of a screwdriver to press it back into shape, and while I wasn't able to remove it completely, the dent at least was looking better. The parts I was swapping needed a good cleaning. I had picked up an inexpensive ultrasonic cleaner which I filled with isopropyl alcohol. I was able to fit the lid and front panel in the basket together, then let the machine do its work for a few minutes. High-quality ultrasonic cleaners can be rather expensive, so I was a bit skeptical how well this cheap one would work. But it did seem to at least be doing something, judging by the small bubbles it was producing. I set the pieces out to dry, then dropped in the bottom panel to see if the electrolyte residue would get cleaned up. Unfortunately, it didn't. The IPA just wasn't strong enough, so I resorted to scrubbing it away with some white vinegar instead. I also learned that the IPA wasn't the best choice for the plastics either. The clear display cover had taken on a foggy appearance that wouldn't wipe off with any cleaners that I had. The only thing I could think of was a bit of a risk, so I ran the other display cover through the IPA to have something to test on. Metal polish like Brasso has proven effective at removing scratches from plastic, but I wasn't sure how well it would work at making the display cover clear again. Apparently, what had happened with the plastic was the result of a chemical reaction with the IPA. It was a mistake on my part to have used it for cleaning, and going forward, I'll just stick to distilled water for plastic parts. In this case, luckily, the polish seemed to do the trick. It took a bit of work, but the test piece was looking clear again, so I repeated the process on the other one. Before I reassembled the recorder, I cleaned up any dust I could see on the transport mechanism and front panel PCB, then went all along the seams in the housing and other parts that I hadn't removed. Cleaning the embossed lettering around things like the audio jacks was a bit tedious, but ultimately worked out well. Then I could put the parts back on in the opposite of how I had removed them. First the top lid, then the front panel. While both bottom panels had similar amounts of scratches and wear, I decided to transfer over the part from the donor recorder as its buttons hadn't gotten yellowed. The big question is, does this newly restored MiniDisc recorder still work? I dropped in a test disc and it seemed to read it, and to my relief, played it just fine. This MZ-R37 has seen a bit of a transformation. It's by no means in perfect condition, but it's gone from looking like a dirty, abused relic of the past to a well-loved portable companion. Often, retro technology collectors strive for museum-quality pieces, but sometimes I like items that show how they were used. The R37 was a basic model when it was introduced in March of 1999. It sold for a bit under $300 US and was also available in this striking blue color. You'd be excused for mistaking it as an earlier MD recorder. By the late 90s, they had generally gotten much smaller and sleeker, like this MZ-R55 from 1998. Nevertheless, the R37 was considered a well-built and reliable recorder, and a pair of AA batteries gave it a runtime of over a dozen hours. That mistake with the IPA and front panel turned into a blessing in disguise, as polishing the LCD window has left it looking better than I found it. And that's all I can really ever ask for when restoring retro tech. It may not always be possible to get something looking brand new again, but with some patience, you can often at least get it looking good. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. You can follow me on social media at thisdoesnotcomp, and as always, thanks for watching.